Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We've got good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Three Martini Lunch podcast and tell your friends to do that as well. Jim, let's dive into what we think is a good martini here. I was minding my own business, watching college basketball with a really good friend last night when all of a sudden the text alert goes off and he says, "Oh, Pete Hegseth's been nominated." And my immediate reaction was, "Oh, for vets?" And he says, "No, for SecDef." I'm like, whoa, I did not see that coming, but that is an intriguing choice. And so the reaction, I think, to the Hegseth nomination has been the most volatile so far, certainly from the left. You had Elizabeth Warren last night, who I'm sure would have loved anyone else that Trump would have chosen, saying, "A Fox and Friends weekend co-host is not qualified to be the Secretary of Defense. I lead the Senate Military Personnel Panel. All three of my brothers served in uniform. I respect every one of our service members. Donald Trump's pick will make us less safe and must be rejected." So why do they not love Pete Hegseth? Well, he is a Fox and Friends weekend co-host. I'm sure that's a big part of it. And he's also not a fan of their DEI approach that we've had over the past 4 years at the Pentagon. In fact, he was on a podcast not that long ago explaining what needs to happen to get our military back to a lethal, lean, focused fighting force and to actually get enough people signing up to serve in the military, which we haven't had lately.
You know, you got to fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and you got to fire this. I mean, obviously, you're going to bring in a new Secretary of Defense, but any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever, that was involved in any of the DEI woke, it's got to go. Either you're in for war fighting, and that's it. And that's the only litmus test we care about. You got to get DEI and CRT out of military academies, so you're not training young officers to be baptized in this type of thinking. And then, you know, whatever the standards, whatever the combat standards were, say, in, I don't know, 1995. Let's just make those the standards. And as far as recruiting, to hire the guy that, you know, did Top Gun Maverick and create some real ads that motivate people to want to serve. And there's lots of other ways in which you could identify who gets promoted and what, but there's an ethos change. I mean, there's a reason people don't want to serve, because they don't trust that their senior leaders are going to have their best interest in mind in combat.
Nonetheless, you've got folks on the CNN panel last night, mainly the left-leaning commentators, saying, "Oh, this is a very political hire. He doesn't have the right type of leadership experience in a organization as large as DOD." And then Scott Jennings, as he usually does, comes through with a little different perspective.
Anyone have confidence in the current leadership of the Pentagon and the way the defense situation has been operating for the last several years? I mean, from the Afghanistan pullout, which was an extreme debacle for which no one was held accountable. We've had spy balloons flying over the United States. We built a $300 million pier as a public relations stunt, which wound up killing an American service member. I'd say I've had just about enough of the so-called insiders running the Defense Department. I think we ought to give Pete Hegseth a chance.
So, Jim, there you go. I think you and I both know Pete Hegseth. I interviewed him years ago when he was running Vets for Freedom, and very smart guy, double Ivy League degrees, veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, combat vet. So he's got the military on-the-ground experience. And based on what Trump said on Truth Social, he wants a guy who's got on-the-ground feel for what the troops are dealing with here. So what do you make of the pick and the firestorm of debate that's followed?
Greg, I think Pete Hegseth is probably going to be a historic pick in that he managed to get a bleeped S-bomb onto this podcast without too much objection. Look, I wrote about this in The Corner earlier today. And you're right, I do, years ago, both The Blaze and Fox News green rooms, I would not pretend to say that I'm, really good buddies with him or anything, but just observe that, seems smart, seems competent, actually has a very impressive resume for a person as young as he is. And I don't think that look, this is all assuming the background check, the confirmation hearings. We don't find out that he's been embezzling money. We don't find out that there's some sort of terrible, assuming that what we know about Pete Hegseth is what we know when he comes up for a confirmation vote. I think the president should get the cabinet officials that he wants, unless the figure is, as I said, scandal, blatantly unqualified. I don't think you can make the case for Hegseth on this. Unless there's some reason to think this person is going to be an utterly incompetent manager or some sort of way beyond the pale ideological extremist, I think the proper role for the Senate is to say, okay, this person checks all the boxes. This person is qualified. Good luck. and get ready for some difficult hearings if you don't perform in the job. I don't know how Pete Hegseth is going to do. I know that managing the Pentagon bureaucracy is a major, major challenge. I also think that the objection that Jennings made there, Lloyd Austin disappeared for a couple of days because he was getting surgery for cancer. And so Joe Biden had no problem with that. They asked him about it. Biden says, no, I'm not asking for his resignation. I don't have any problem with that. One of the consequences of having Trump as president, I went through the entire cabinet in this corner post. Trump had about 2 cabinet secretaries for almost every department. There were only a handful that lasted the full 4 years. Some of this was burnout. Some of this was frustration of working with Trump. Some of this was Trump getting frustrated with his own cabinet secretaries and feeling like they weren't carrying out his agenda. So far, the Trump cabinet is like the weather in Chicago. If you don't like it, just wait. It's going to change. My guess is a bunch of these people will burn out by the midterms similarly. You could argue that's because of Trump. You could argue that because of the pace of change. Whatever it is, I think the argument, give Pete Hegseth a chance, is entirely reasonable. If he's not good, he'll be out of there pretty fast. I think that's safe to assume. And that goes for Kristi Noem. She's going to kill the coyotes who are trying to do the human smuggling. Every one of these people, unless you find something in the background check that says, oh my goodness, no, this person should not be in this job, I think you should give Trump the nominees that they want and let them rise or fall. And, unlike with Biden, where once you're in there and you stink at the job, Mayorkas, or Cardona, Khan, any of these people, they're there for the 4 years. There's no way Biden was going to fire anybody for incompetence. Trump, look, what's his signature claim? You're fired. Trump cabinet officials do not stick around very long if they are not performing or if they irk the boss. So my guess is let these people go into the job. We'll see what happens. But, maybe they won't be good. But I think unless you come up with something in the course of the background check, confirmation hearings, et cetera, that says this person is definitely going to fail in the job, I think you got to give him a shot and see what happens.
Yeah, he hasn't been a factor and a figure in the Pentagon bureaucracy, but he has clearly studied this for a very long time. He's written books on this about how Pentagon leadership failed the warriors and that sort of thing. So he's a deep thinker. He's a very smart guy. He's been around a very long time. He's a very good communicator. I think he's absolutely right about the DEI stuff. I think that's been an absolute cancer on military recruitment because the type of people who are interested in serving in the military are not interested in sitting through all that nonsense. And so we will find out. But I'll be very, very excited to see Pete Hegseth in that situation. I think he could be an excellent figure at the Pentagon. All right, well, let's talk about the phenomenal meat you get from Omaha Steaks. And the holiday season is right around the corner. Nothing's going to deliver comfort or joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks have been around since 1917. They are the world's butcher. And Jim loves the steaks. I love the steaks. They're so tender. They even send you packets to do different marinades and flavors. Mrs. Columbus always does a great job. The burgers are fantastic. Excellent portions. Very, very tasty. Great to have on hand, whether you need a quick meal or you really want to do it upright with the gourmet. They're so, so good. And right now, here's the great deal. Save 50% site-wide at omahasteaks.com, plus get an extra 30% off with the promo code 3ML and get a $30 reward card when you shop early. So they're going to give you stuff like the classic favorites collection, including 22 total items like the fully cooked beef meatballs, or the deluxe gift with free shipping and burgers, including 26 total items, such as 2 5-ounce butcher's cut top sirloins. But they've also got seafood, chicken, wine, sides, and dessert. Visit omahasteaks.com and save 50% off site-wide. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with the promo code, the number 3, ML, and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code, the number 3, ML. Minimum purchase may apply. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini. And this was a bad martini when the news broke that this had happened. And now we've actually got some progress in the investigation on this. New York Post with the story, but a lot of people are reporting on this today. A CIA official has been charged with leaking highly classified U.S. documents about Israel's potential plan to strike back against Iran over a missile attack. Asif W. Rahman, who worked overseas for the agency and held a top security clearance, was arrested by the FBI in Cambodia on Tuesday over the leaks. His arrest comes after the top secret materials started circulating online last month, detailing Israel's apparent intention to retaliate after Iran launched a barrage of missiles back on October 1st. The files, which were prepared by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, in part detailed satellite imagery tied to the potential Israeli strike, as well as the various kinds of missiles on hand. This was only meant for the Five Eyes: Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United States, and the UK. And so, Jim, we've talked before how certain figures in this administration, especially on the issue of Iran, have leaked like a sieve because they're either sympathetic to Iran or they don't like Israel, or usually a combination of both. Good that they actually pursued this. Good that they got an arrest. The fact that this happened at all is still a pretty bad stain on the intelligence community.
It's utterly infuriating, enraging. The arrogance, the belief that, well, I have access to this information, and, the public has entrusted me in this. The institution has trusted me with this. The country has trusted me with this information to handle it responsibly. And I'm going to put this out there because I've decided the world should know how Israel's going to attack. Look, you don't see treason indictments anymore, but that's, this is basically saying, I've decided I want to help Iran more than I want to help my own country. There is absolutely no patience, no tolerance, or it just enrages anyone who handles national classified material. They understand the severe consequences of this. We've seen the absent-minded mishandling of classified materials by high-level officials, and it kind of gets, it happens. Everybody accidentally takes documents back, and that's bad. But this one is deliberate. This one is very much, I have decided Iran's best interests are more important to me than my own country's best interests, and screwing with Israel is more important to me. Let's point out, look, I don't, based on the name of this suspect, we don't know his faith, but we can take a guess. We can, don't know his heritage, but we can take a guess. And this is going to put a cloud of suspicion on every Muslim employee of the national security community, every Arab American, every Palestinian American, everyone who is of that, of that origin. That's really unfair. It's what people really don't deserve. Wearing a headscarf to those places should not put you on the suspected spy list or extra scrutiny from the counterintelligence community. But when things like this happen, people jump to those kinds of conclusions. And so it stinks on every possible level. I hope they throw the book at this guy. I hope he gets convicted. And I hope he goes to prison for a very long time as a deterrent effect against anybody else who feels like they've got very strong foreign policy views and they want to use their job within the intelligence community as a way to influence the world events.
Other than obviously throwing the book at this guy, like you said, it probably won't result in a treason charge, even though a few generations ago it would have. What do you do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? What kind of fear do you have to put into people that if you get caught doing this is going to be really, really bad?
So writing about this for the thriller novels and such, there usually are like four big motivations for people who betray their country. One is money. One of them, very surprisingly, motivation is often ego or a sense of being undervalued, underappreciated, and there's kind of this seething, I will show these people. Sex, honey traps, the Russians are big fans of those. Then ideology. You saw this more during the Cold War. And maybe this is we'll see more when the indictment comes out, what the motivation was. I suppose if you really look at it and you believe that Israel is the force of all evil in this world, if you're a raging anti-Semite, if you look at it and say, the Iranian mullahs, they're really misunderstood. They're much more wise, reasonable guys that along those lines. Those would be the four you'd find most likely to be the case. Again, we don't know the specifics in this case. We'll learn more, but usually it's among them. By the way, some of the people who are in the paramilitary forces or the Central Intelligence Agency groups, they do not get particularly well paid. So I am always a big fan of giving these people, no one goes into the intelligence work or the national security community for the money. No, actually, you really want to do it so you get to, press the button on drone strikes and kill bad people. You get an enormous sense of satisfaction, patriotism, a sense of value and importance and consequence to your life and what you do. But nonetheless, I think people should be well paid. I think people should be appreciated. You should always tell when your people are doing a good job, tell them that. Sex can't help you there. The government can't give you more sex if you're looking for that. Generally just be wary of hot Russians. Be wary of hot Russians, even if you're a congressman, be wary of very attractive Chinese women who seem interested in you for no reason. Tim Walz. And then finally, ideology. if you don't really think that America is awesome, you probably should not go to work for the U.S. intelligence community. You probably should be on your own side.
I think that's the best way to do it. Maybe we need to develop better ways to screen, but I think that's ultimately it, is regardless of your political persuasions, you're on Team USA, and no matter what else is going on, you got to adhere to that and honor your oath to the Constitution. So very well said. And again, hopefully there's not more figures in on this release of leaked information, but if there are, I hope we find them real fast too. Way better than that, and much simpler than that conversation, is Lumen. Look, if your metabolism is becoming an issue and you're just not feeling right, feeling sluggish, maybe Lumen would be perfect for you, because it's a simple way to figure out what your body is doing with its metabolism. All you have to do is wake up in the morning. That's step one. Grab your Lumen, take a deep breath in, exhale into your Lumen. It'll tell you if you're burning fat, you're burning carbs. And the more information you give it, the more it'll help you detail your workouts, your stress levels, your sleep, and a whole lot more.
And remember, if you can't do that step one, wake up, you probably have serious problems with your metabolism.
Right.
Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, ideal metabolic health translates to a whole bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep. And Lumen will give you recommendations to improve your metabolic health.
Again, it could not be simpler, and it's a huge help simplifying your approach to good health. So if you want to stay on track with your health this holiday season, go to lumen.me/3ml to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/3ml for 15% off your purchase. Lumen makes a great gift too. Again, that's lumen.me/3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Jim, for our Crazy Martini, a follow-up on one of the stories we just kind of mentioned in passing yesterday. We were talking about the Pennsylvania Senate race and Bob Casey's refusal to concede yesterday, and we mentioned that in some states, there's still a ton of votes to be counted. In the presidential race, even in California, as of yesterday, they'd barely hit 80% a week after the election. We talked about how well Florida does it. They've got everything pretty much wrapped up, even in tight races, by about 11 o'clock on election night. They are the gold standard. So why is it so slow out there? And we also mentioned Utah, maybe not even 70% perhaps counted. So NBC reporter Jane Tim looked into this, and here are the reasons that she came up with as to why it takes a long time to count votes out in the Golden State.
So why is California still counting their ballots a week after the election? California has a lot of pro-voter policies that mean it takes a while to count their ballots. So they have same-day voter registration. That means that the election officials have to check the registrations and make sure they're accurate before they can process the votes. That means they also have a lot of provisional ballots. They take longer to count. They also have mail ballots, which also take longer to count because you have to verify these mail ballots versus verifying the voter in person. Most people in California do vote by mail. And last but not least, there's a lot of people who live in California, 22 million voters to be exact, and that's way more voters than most states have. So when California takes its time on the counting, it's because they simply have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, Florida could count all those votes in 2 days max, probably less than that. Okay, one of the big problems here, Jim, is mail. You should be able to get your butt to the poll, whether early voting or preferably same day, to get that done. And also same day registration. Most states don't have that because it gums up the works exactly like this. And then you have to do all this bureaucratic work just to see if the vote is even going to matter. So what do you make of the explanation? I think she did a good job of explaining what's at work here. But California pretty much doing everything possible to not get timely election results.
But one of the other factors I've heard is the number of referendum that they have in California. Some years they have dozens and Proposition, 84, and it just goes on for a long time. Which, the more things you have to vote for, that is going to take the longer time it is to count. But that by itself doesn't explain it. And the argument, California's got a lot of people. Texas is at 99% counted. Florida is at 99% counted. I look, even New York State. And let's face it, I insert Jets joke here, right? Jokes of incompetence, Kathy Hochul, all that kind of stuff. They're at 91%, right? So like there are a whole bunch of big states that figure out how to do this. You can't help. Look, Florida was so embarrassed by the 2000 recount and the hanging chads, the bug-eyed people who were holding them up to the light to try to figure out if it was a dimpled chad or a partially punctured chad or cute chad or whatever, all the different categories there. It embarrassed them. They wanted to do a better job, and ever since then, they've been doing gangbusters. They have updated all their equipment. They automated a bunch of this stuff. They have all this stuff is at the top of the line. They made it a priority, and they fixed it, which demonstrates, no offense to the Floridians out there, God love you, if the Floridians could do it, anybody else can do it. There's no excuse for, look, if the land of Florida man can count the votes very quickly, California man and Utah man, none of you guys have any other excuses. We should give a little bit of credit. I went and I checked. So some of this, by the way, as I noted, I think yesterday, sometimes CNN does not, like various news sites don't update them as often as they should. So I went and I checked. It was there. Now on CNN, Utah is up to 91%, which is reasonable. But then it's been 8 days.
Yeah.
I know it's probably the start of ski season. It's getting colder, but like you really should get out there to be able to count these votes for some more. And so like, I don't know if we can enact a national standard or national expectation, but like, why is it November 13th and we're pretty sure Republicans are going to win the House? They are. We kind of know it. But it's not official yet because they're still counting the votes, not just in California, but in a couple of different states. Really infuriating. Right? And the other thing is that it's been floating around all over this idea of, well, the 20,000, there are 20 million votes in 2020 that did not show up this year. Clearly, this means 2020 was stolen. Greg, you and I are old enough to remember that for about a day after Election Day 2012, people thought Mitt Romney was going to win the popular vote. And then California came in, and Obama's vote total went much, much higher. So what it is, the short answer is like having a long look. And granted, I don't expect California to be able to count the votes as quickly as, say, Delaware or Vermont. By the way, for a forthcoming post column, Rick Scott's margin of victory in the Florida Senate race was 3.5 times the total vote in the state of Vermont. Give you a sense of the differentiation of populations of these states. So I understand certain states are probably going to take a little bit longer to count the votes, but a week feels very reasonable. And again, the other thing is I think, I don't think this is necessarily a factor in California, but it is a factor in some of these other states. The argument that, well, if you mail it in and it shows up after Election Day, well, first of all, you'd better have it postmarked by the deadline. And in most states, the deadline is Election Day. I don't like the idea of votes continuing to come in for 1 day, 2 day, 3 days after that. And I really don't like the idea of votes without a postmark and the court saying, well, you got to count it because you just don't know when it was sent. Right. The longer it takes to count these votes, the more these conspiracy theories flourish. Right now, the turnout in 2024 is 10 million less than it was in 2020. The estimation of what's left to count and all that stuff, you'll probably be in the ballpark. Maybe it'll end up being 3 million short. It wouldn't, of what we had last cycle, it wouldn't stun me if it was a little bit lower. 2020 was a really unusual set of circumstances. I think because of COVID, everybody was, what the government did mattered to everyone. We'd had a year of lockdowns. Then you have George Floyd, then the riots, and all that. Like, it was a really intense time. Most years turnout goes up from year to year because the population goes up. 2020, maybe it was like, a more politically intense year. 2024, I know it seems like this was a politically intense one. But if we miss the turnout in 2020, we're not going to miss it by that much. It's going to be a couple of million. So that missing 20 million never existed. The missing 10 million doesn't exist. We're getting down to, probably 2-3 million less than last time, which doesn't feel out of the ordinary or a sign that there was something strange or hinky about the election results of 2020.
Jim, at risk of sounding like I'm from the Department of Redundancy Department, this makes me so thankful for the Electoral College. Yes, Trump looks like he's going to win the popular vote fairly comfortably, but let's say it's razor thin at this point, and you've still got states now over a week, possibly stretching into 2 weeks and beyond, and that popular vote hanging on a razor's edge, and you'd have bug-eyed people all over the country in these final precincts. It would be a total chaotic mess. Thank you, founders, for the Electoral College. And we can
Greg,
move on to this transition.
on the topic of the Department of Redundancy Department, as the author of the Weed Agency, I salute anyone who attempts to reduce government bureaucracy. I wish the very best to Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy in their joint role. The first thought is that if we want to have a special department of reducing bureaucracy, maybe just have one guy in charge instead of two.
Trump's apparently giving him 500 some days to get the job done. We'll see if that happens. But yes, it is a bit weed agency-ish to create a new department to get. But
anyway, good luck, fellas.
Anyway, hey, if we can actually get rid of a bunch of bloat, that would be amazing. So, Jim, have a great day. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast. If you don't already, please tell your friends about us. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. They're a huge help to us. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Wednesday and join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.